Today I'm just going to tell you a little bit about dyeing wool. These are techniques that I've worked out through trial and error, so when you do it you might be able to add to the experiment and learn more. This is what I've found out. So I have a pot. This is just an old pot from the op shop. It's an aluminium one and that's fine. Now you never ever have the same pot for cooking. Just keep it separate. This is just a pot for dyeing. I have a wooden spoon. Now I have found that food dyes, which are non-toxic, work very well for wool and for emu feathers, which I use a lot in my work. You take your emu feathers, put them in the pot with some water. Now the fun part of this process is mixing the colours. You can get most glorious colours by mixing, say this one I would have used yellows and this bright pillar box red. You can get every colour under the sun by mixing your primary colours, blue, yellow and red. Most beautiful browns can be got by mixing those colours together. Now the other thing that I dye a lot is old blankets. Now these old blankets I've just found at the op shop for a couple of dollars. Beautiful old woolen blankets that are very precious because they're the remnants of the old Australian blanket industry, which has now moved to China. But if you're lucky, you can still find these beautiful old woolen blankets in the op shops. So you pop whatever you're going to do, dye in your pot. Now the secret ingredient is vinegar. Now I just buy this vinegar for about $1 a bottle at Woolies, and you chuck about a cupful per pot, and the vinegar seems to open up the fibres and the colour grabs into the fibre and it lasts forever. Now the really interesting thing is if you do a bit of old-fashioned tie-dye or shibori while you're at it, and that's just gathering up your blanket like this, putting a few rubber bands around it, maybe giving it a twist, and then popping it in the pot, and then just dribbling different colours. Once again, it's just on the experimental stage, and when you're doing it you might have other ideas. Now the other thing I'd like to tell you about is when we're felting we use raw wool. Now this bundle of wool here comes from the Nundle woolen mills in New South Wales, and they had the most beautiful soft merino wool, and if you buy it in bulk like this it's very cheap. Now you can make just about every colour using the food dyes, except I've found purple's a bit hard to make. So I use, this is an industrial dye. It's made up in Brisbane and it's also very cheap if you buy it in bulk. These dyes I am most impressed with. These are just the dyes that you use for cooking, for doing you know, cakes and things. But if you buy them in bulk, you can Google Queen is the name, and they will do you a good deal if you buy a lot. Much cheaper than buying it little bottles at the supermarket. So that's the story with the dyeing, and I boil them up for about an hour at least. Then I turn off the heat I use this old wood stove, which keeps its heat really well. I just turn off when the fire dies down and let it sit and cool overnight. And then in the morning, you will find that nearly all the dye has been sucked into the wool. Then it's just a matter of rinsing it off, either in the tub or throw it in the washing machine, or with me, I just leave it out in the rain for a day, and any dye or vinegar is rinsed out. So that's what I've learned about dyeing. So when you've dyed your woolen blanket, you can make it into anything you want. I've just made this jacket for a rather large person, and this is just a bit of felting that's been made with the dyed. The fun thing with the dyeing is getting the colours exactly what you'd want. I find with greens, basic green with a little bit of red turns it into a beautiful Australian green, I call it. It's just got that tinge of the bush bit of red. I could talk for hours about browns, the beautiful browns that you can get with yellow, red and blue. If you want a really deep Central Australian red, you put a lot of red, a little bit of blue and lots of yellow. But I'll leave it to you to find out the joy of the colours. I found that the ponchos are very popular, and so I'll show you how I start to make a little poncho. First of all, this is an old blanket that I found at the Oppie. Now I've dyed it this beautiful dark colour because I think it had checks on it and we didn't want the checks. So I lay out the blanket. I think of a rough design, and then I get some of my beautiful dyed wool. I'll just show you some of my wool that I've dyed. So here I have selections of beautiful dyed wool. Here we go. And then I decide on my colour scheme. I lay out my colours. Here we go. Just show you here. Now, it's very easy. It's not like it's a craft that you have to learn for years how to do. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just spreading out the wool, lovely soft merino wool, and I'm just going to lay it down. Now I've got this great little tool here. This is just called a felting tool, and it's got sharp little needles that have got tiny barbs, and the felting happens when the wool is pushed together. The little fibres of the wool lock like that, and there's two ways of felting. One way is with a needle like this. This is called needle felting, and the needle will, over time, if you do a lot of it, it will lock those fibres in. Now the other way of felting is wet felting, and with wet felting you rub the wool and you just be as mean to it as you want to, and it will lock in with water and a bit of soap helps. I might show you an example of that later. So here we go. Now one of the problems is you've got to be careful with kids and stray animals because these are very sharp. If you get it through your finger, you'll certainly know about it. So just as a bit of a safety warning, try and not let little children anywhere near this, and certainly don't let them play with it. I don't allow children under 10 to do this exercise because you've got to have some hand-eye coordination, and it's a bit of a worry. So you can see I'm doing that now. The other little thing that I'll just show you, because I've started here, is I've put some threads, some just ordinary wool, just to make a fun pattern there. You can see that there. Now, it would take a long time to do this properly. And one day I was hammering away at my design and I thought, wouldn't it be good if there was a machine that would do this for me? And so I got on the internet and I found that in fact there were machines, and there was a man in Colorado in America who made little felting machines to make industrial felt. You can get really big ones for factories, but I just wanted a small one for my home business. So I wrote away and I found that he would make me one, especially for Australian conditions that write electricity. And so I paid about $4,000 by the time I'd paid the tax, for import tax, and I had no idea if it was going to be successful, but I just thought it might, and I'll show it to you now. It's really exciting because in fact it has turned what could be quite a time-consuming production into a really viable industry. So I'll finish up here and we'll show you the machine. And of course, it's always good to get family and friends involved. Here's my son Alex having a go, and it's one of those activities you can all sit round together and chat and work on any time of the day or night. It's easy. I forgot to tell you that it's good to have either a thick carpet like I've got underneath, or even a mat like this underneath. The books tell you that you can use foam, but I've found foam really hard work. I much prefer a carpet or a mat underneath your work. There is just one important thing to tell you about needle felting. These little needles are very sharp, but they're also fragile. So you have to be careful when you're doing your felting to make sure that you go straight up and straight down. If you come at an angle and flip it over, the needles will snap. The needles can be replaced, but you don't want to be wasting needles. So very important. You can see I'm going straight up and straight down, and I'm not snapping over. Very important. So that's the technique. Up and down, up and down, up and down, and you're laughing. So here's the garment that we made, and I'd like you to have a look at this machine. Now this is the machine I was telling you about that has a whole lot of needles in it. If you look carefully, see all those sharp needles? Now the thing is that the machine does the hard work of pushing the wool through the blanket and locking it in to the wool. Now, the other way of making felt involves an awful lot of rubbing. Now that wool there has been what we call wet felted, and it's made a nice thick felt. Now, I was too lazy to do all that because I want to have an industry where we can pump things out in an hour to make it cost effective, whereas this takes about 3 days. I can do something in an hour just as good with the help of the machine. And so this is needle felting on a grand scale. And the other saving is wool is quite expensive to buy, raw wool. If we want to sell something, say for $50, we don't want the materials to cost $50. We're trying to have a money-making enterprise. Now, these old blankets contain $100 worth of wool. I pay maybe $2 at the op shop. So the old blankets are in fact saving us making all that wool from scratch. So anyway, here we go. Let's have it going. So it's a little bit noisy. All right, the last step in the production of our beautiful little poncho is wet felting. I've talked about how we needle felt the wool into the blanket, and you can see how nice and firm that is. But to make it really strong, what we need to do is lock those fibres really tight. And how we do that is with the help of a dear old washing machine. Now, hot water and friction will create felt. So this is like a final step to create a really strong felted garment. So all we do is we just chuck him in. It doesn't have to go for a long time. So there he is in there. Any kind of washing machine will do. Now, when your felting is washed, the felt, the wool part shrinks a bit, which is what we want. It's just that while it's still wet, it's important to make it stretch so that it's not too lumpy. Sometimes, if you're not careful, things can get a bit lumpy. See how nice and strong that is now. So that's not going to fall out. So all I'm doing is just making sure that everything is flat. A little bit of puckering is always nice because it shows that it's a handcrafted item, and it adds to the texture of the work of art, really. But I'm very happy with the way that turned out.